Brother Brian's here. Brother Neil.
Morning, everybody.
What's up, Brother Chris?
How you
Morning,
doing?
You got a jazzy new haircut this morning, didn't you?
Yes, I did. And for some reason, my camera is actually framing me right, so I'm happy. Normally, I'm like down here or something weird. I need a new camera. That's all there is to it.
What's up, Bonchan?
Give my son the cheaper one.
Hey, Joe. Man, I love
You guys hear me all right?
Joe, Scott called me 2 weeks ago and he goes, "It's important." So I get out of the shower and I call him back and he's like, "Hey, I'm going to Bonchon like you told me to. I need to know." He goes, "Hey, it's important." And I go, "Soy garlic." He goes, "No, I'm at Bonchon and I need to know the flavor I need to order." And I said, "Yeah, soy garlic."
Yep.
You guys hear me all right?
Yeah.
I knew the answer before you asked the question.
Yeah.
Hello, Richard. Oh,
That's right. Y'all are in the DMV area, right?
Yep. Who's this Barbara chick? What's up with that?
Oh, good Lord. I know my wife and I take turns on this computer.
It's all right.
Damn it. Can't even spell my name right.
And Neil dressed up.
Is my audio okay, or do I need a pair of headsets?
I can hear you, unfortunately.
Can you hear me all right? Can you hear me all right? Can you hear me all right?
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
Neil, you sound good.
Yep.
I had trouble linking the microphone. So,
Ladies and gentlemen, Neil will be your waiter this evening. He'll be explaining the specials.
Now he looks more like the guy that asked cigarette.
That's right.
Cigarillo?
That's right.
I'll be in the corner,
Oh,
the
right.
guy in the corner with the cigar.
That's right.
Scotch.
Well, if it was warmer, I would be outside with my cigar in this meeting. So when it warms up, I'll
amen
do
to that. Amen to that.
Yes. Huge fan of cigars myself. All right. We have, just so you all know, where are we at? For the meeting, for the event, I had, maybe click 15 times. 32 people signed up as going, 56 interested. So that's our biggest number for that.
Chris, there were people this morning asking me for the Zoom link. So
Okay, excellent. So this could be a record for us.
I shared it to my brother John Mallon in Motherwell, southeast of Glasgow. So perhaps you'll make
Excellent.
it on too.
Excellent.
And you
Brother Spence, look at what I found on my shopping trip in Stratford yesterday.
Get out. What got? Was there another one?
Yeah, Brother Budge has got it.
Sweet. Yeah,
So
no,
my wife,
we have it. We have it. Yeah.
my wife has gone to Windsor for the weekend to look after grandkids. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna have haggis for supper tonight.
That's the way, brother. Get some potatoes on and tatties and.
Or for you, less for me.
Well, no, I'm not. I wasn't inviting myself during the pandemic. Thank you.
I wanted to invite myself to eat haggis even if it weren't a pandemic, but that's just
Brother Spence, you'd be welcome to come here. I sit in the kitchen and you could sit outside on the deck and we could look at each other through the patio doors.
Okay, boss.
Where I live in Cornwall, we have something very similar to haggis. It's called faggots. It's basically just the same thing, a small haggis, but in a small sort of cricket size or tennis ball size thing with skin around.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's delicious.
Like personal size.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Very
personal
nice.
pan haggis. Yes, the Scotland Pizza Hut offers that personal pan haggis.
You can buy the haggis covered in batter as well, in all sorts of weird things.
Oh, yeah. Jeez.
Brian, you're a co-host, so please let people in
It would.
at your leisure.
At my leisure, you mean sometime
You're on
eventually?
point there, brother.
Yeah. Well, it's just a polite way. You know what's funny? If I say to you in like an email, as soon as possible, it sounds polite, but if I say ASAP, it's rude and like, do it now. And And I have no idea if STAT is actually an acronym, so but STAT would be worse.
You need to add please, and then it's okay too.
Okay.
You can tell people to jump off a cliff if you say please at the end. They might do it,
This is true.
and they won't be offended. And you
Dead, but not offended.
anyway, if you're telling them to jump off a cliff, so don't worry. Well, we're all friends and family here. No worries, brother. Sorry about that. I'll turn my.
If you're using Zoom on desktop, it has a really nifty feature where you can mute yourself and then just hold down the space bar when you want to talk.
If you click your heel 3 times, James, it will also mute you.
It could send you somewhere too.
One of these days I'll be completely prepared to start this meeting on time and not have to go get a drink or anything. One of these days. So I want to say hello to everybody who agreed to be on the panel. Almost here, see you on here. I appreciate Joe Martinez connecting us, and I won't hold the fact that you know him against you. So.
Reputation precedes me. Oh, Chris, John's not going to be able to make it.
Okay. I shall make do with what we have. I see Greg's here.
Just don't ask Brad anything because he's weird.
Right. Well, that's half the fun. No. You ask the weird people the questions. Nice to meet you, Brad.
Pleasure to meet you.
All
nice
right.
to be.
Nice. Oh, well, since we started with you, go ahead. Well, he's drinking. Brad, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, good morning, brothers. My name's Brad Drew. I am a member, current senior deacon of Lexington Lodge number 1 here in Lexington, Kentucky. We originally Lexington number 25 under the Grand Lodge of Virginia, and from 1788 until 1800, and then we decided to get away from you. So, but happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome.
Welcome,
We'll
Brad.
talk about that later. Okay, and Greg McCartney, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, brother. My name is Greg McCarney. I'm a past master of Midlothian Lodge number 211 in Midlothian, Virginia. And I'm also a member of Richmond Randolph 19. Meets in downtown Richmond at Mason's Hall.
Excellent. Let's see, any other ones? Joe Martinez, you all met last week, and I think everybody was here who doesn't know him personally, but
Brother
go ahead and
Martin,
say hello, Joe. Yep.
Great talk last week. Thank you.
We really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Joe brought several people here at my request. I wanted some more TO members, and he obliged. So thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thanks for having
me. Neil, please introduce yourself. Do you go by Neil or Neely? You're Neely on the Facebook.
Yeah, both. My mother always called me Neil, and she passed away a year and a half ago. And in the last few months of her life, I started putting up Neely because that's what I was named after her father, my grandfather, and that's what he went by. So there are some that call me both, and there are other people that call me whatever they wish.
Indeed.
So I'm here because of my association with Temple of Lucis Lodge in Stratford, Ontario, which is an observant lodge that I happened to be charter master of in the years 2016 through 2017.
Excellent.
I've been a Mason for 41 years this year. So.
Ooh, got me beat. All right, and let's see. John, I don't know if John Rorts is here yet. No. I'm just going to introduce all y'all as I see you come in. James Buckhorn, please introduce yourself to what lodge you're from and such.
Hello, brethren. I'm in the Indianapolis area in Indiana. I'm here representing Pentalpha Lodge number 564, which is a forming TO lodge in Indianapolis, and I've also attended the 4 TO lodges we have in Indiana. They're all very different, and I look forward to being able to talk about that. I've actually visited all 4 of them in the last week. They all meet in January.
Oh, excellent.
So I'm super excited, and we're also starting I guess a Scottish concept lodge, you'd call it, up in the northeast part of the state.
Very cool. Let's see, Matt Parker, not on yet. I don't see him.
I'll wake him up.
Okay, and Daniel DiNatale, I don't see him yet. And I got Joe and I got Neil. Okay, and John Rourke isn't on yet. So I got most of my panel. I got enough people here to do a panel, so.
Hey, brother Chris, Ruark's
Listen.
coming.
Rourke's not, oh, he's the one, the John you're saying, okay. You said John, I don't know names well enough yet, so, okay. But that's fine. Gentlemen, that's our panel. Is there anyone else here who I didn't mention who is a member of a Traditional Observance Lodge or was involved in one and wants to join in and answer questions? No pressure. If you don't, that's fine. Okay, I'll ask again right before we start. It's just 10 o'clock. We're already recording, but it's just 10 o'clock. We've had more people join. I'll go ahead and do the official stuff. You are in Virginia Research Lodge number 1777's weekly unstated Zoom meeting. We can't have stated online, so I have unstated meetings because it goes without saying we can't meet online, so it's unstated. That's my joke. You're welcome to steal it. Today we're going to be talking about Traditional Observance Masonry. We're going to give everybody a few minutes to get situated, maybe say hi to a few people before we start. Today's going to be a panel discussion, and I appreciate all the brothers who volunteered to come in and talk. I will have a little bit of intro for y'all. Neil, I did review your paper. It covers some stuff I'm already going to cover, but I appreciate you sending it to me. But I didn't want to have a full-on paper. I'm just going to summarize, and then we're going to ask questions of you all. So feel free to elaborate.
Oh, Matt's here.
Ooh, Matt Parker.
Excellent. Brother Matt, please introduce yourself.
I am Matt Parker, Junior Warden of Wendell Lodge 565 in Wendell, North Carolina. I'm a founding member of the Lodge of the Nine Sisters, number 773 in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is one of the 3 traditional observance lodges in the state of North Carolina.
All right, glad you're here. Excellent radio voice. I won't be mean to say you have a face for radio, but it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
Get them to help you.
You're a Virginia Mason. Rooster is on, so everybody say hi to Rooster.
Yes, Rooster is our senior warden, and
Hey, brother.
hopefully soon our worshipful master of Research Lodge, if we ever get to meet in person again.
Good morning.
Good to see you, Rooster. Glad you're here, sir. Ooh, we're up to almost 40 members. We're doing great here. Well, people are still pouring in, so we're not going to jump right into the talk yet. I want to give everybody a chance to get settled, and I don't want to catch it at the middle. I will say this is being recorded, and it will be out on YouTube. I'm a little behind, but I don't have last week's up yet, but I have previous weeks up, and I do my best to get the recordings up on YouTube within a week, and they're all accessible from the group. So if you missed one, or if you want to watch one over again, and somebody paused recording. Okay, that's weird. Okay, recording was paused for some reason, not sure why. But anyway, as I was saying, we are going to be on YouTube later in the week for people to go back to watch, or tell your friends who missed it they can go watch. Let me see if there's anybody else I need to introduce. I do appreciate everybody coming out. Anybody else from Research Lodge? It's funny that this group seems to be taken over by a majority of non-Research Lodge members. In fact, a majority of non-Virginia Masons, but that's quite all right. I like the fact we've got an international reach. A lot of Canadian brothers and a lot of English and Scottish brothers have become regulars here. It's great to see you all.
Canadian, eh?
Yep.
Don't know what that's all about.
Yes. All right.
Just
Brian,
kidding.
you need to, Brian, stay away from the controls, please. Well, it's
Yeah.
just me and Brian are the hosts. So I knew it was one of us who, and I didn't think it was me. Sure, my.
Well, Brother Christopher, thanks for the nice welcome for
Oh.
from your international visitors or outside of Virginia.
No, I do appreciate that.
I intend to come down and harass you guys one day.
That would be great.
Maybe Neil and I both.
Yeah, that would be great.
I could be talked into that.
Okay. We'd
Not
love to
too
see it.
far.
Well, that is the really cool thing about the internet. We're able to have these meetings and I get to know people who are from other places in the world. It's kind of crazy, but we take all this stuff for granted, but I have to step back once in a while and go, we weren't even able to do this like 10 years ago. The technology is there, and thanks to COVID, we've started making more use of it. So that's one of the few good things to come out of this mess is we're doing more online stuff and meeting with brothers in other places. Part of my goal with this and the other subjects we have is I want to try and share what Masonry is like in other parts of the world. One of my big complaints is that a lot of Masons here in Virginia, at least, they never travel much beyond their own lodge or their own district, much less going across the state or even visiting other jurisdictions. And I think the ability to go and travel, to go and visit other lodges in other countries is one of the great gifts that Masonry offers, and too few take advantage of it. So at least this way we can virtually go and meet brothers from other places and hear about how they do things there. They're similar and different from what we do. So.
And to Brother Matt Parker there, I'm sorry I don't have enough Timmys for everybody. No Tim Hortons today.
Oh my goodness, I am so.
The Canadian border cop
Timmy's for the
still ask people to say roll up the rim to win, and if you can't say roll up the rim to win, then they don't let you through.
Roll the otters.
Okay, so why don't you tell everybody what a Tim Horton is, because I know it's a restaurant, I think, but I don't know.
Well, we're creeping into, we're in Western New York, I know that, but no, that it's it's a coffee and donut establishment and sandwiches but very select. That was originally founded by brother Tim Hortons who played with the Leafs and with the Buffalo Sabres, and I think someone else.
Okay.
But he tragically died early in a hot speeding car accident or something like that. So, but it's a one-stop place if you want a light lunch. That's for sure.
Okay.
We try to have quality stuff.
Great.
And in Canada, they're everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the? I think that Mike Myers was kind of paying tribute to that in Wayne's World. Was it a Tim Hortons, or did they call it something else? I think they called it another.
Stan Makitas.
What was it?
Stan Makitas.
Right. Okay.
Oh, so it was
it was not an actual thing, but it was a Tim Hortons reference there. Okay.
That's right. That whole scene where they were eating those great big crullers or something, or apple fritters there. Yeah, that's right too.
Right. Okay. Oh, I see. We got a brother from the Dominican Republic, Brother Pete. Say hello, please.
That's hello, cool. Everyone. Good to be here. I hope I can learn a little bit. My goal here in the Dominican Republic is to try and get a pendant body York Rite going, Red Lodge, as they call it down here.
Oh,
wow. For Royal Arch, and COVID kind of put a curve on that. I had to go to Panama to get all my higher degree work in York Rite so that I could commence requesting through our Grand Lodge the ability to form it. And right now it's on hold for a year, but I'm trying, and I hopefully maybe this year later on, if this COVID gets controlled, we can do it.
Oh, excellent. That's really cool. So is it, you're just trying to form a new Royal Arch chapter down there, or are there none in the Dominican, or I don't know the status?
There was one back in the late 70s, but it became defunct, and it doesn't have a charter anymore. I spoke to the deputy director for the higher degrees in Panama, and he did some research for me. And if the only way we can get chartered is to start a whole new lodge. And so, working with him, they're willing to come over. I just have to get enough Master Masons to be interested to become companions.
Excellent, excellent. Oh, I see we have 40 participants now, so that's excellent. I think we got enough to start then. It's 10 after 10. People can jump in. As I mentioned, this is going to be recorded, so if you miss any of it, you can watch it on YouTube later. But I'm thinking I want to go ahead and start. If everybody's okay with that. Hello again. My name is Chris Douglas. I'm a past master of Ocean View Lodge, number 335 in Norfolk, Virginia. I'm also the junior deacon for another couple of weeks for Virginia Research Lodge. And we'll be having our annual in February. And I'll be making note of that. We are planning to actually meet in person to do our annual and elect Brother Rooster to Worshipful Master, and then close the meeting without having a speaker, and then go online and have our Zoom meeting sometime around 11 on that day. That'll be February 20th. So I'm kind of excited about putting that together, having an in-person meeting and our online meeting the same day. That should be a lot of fun. So anyway, I'm currently the junior deacon, though I should be senior deacon by now, but we didn't get to have an annual. Virginia Research Lodge is happy to host these weekly meetings. And today we're talking about traditional observance masonry. And hopefully some of you are asking, well, what is traditional observance masonry? And we will do our best to answer that question. I only know about it from what I've read and what I've heard from people. And it's come up in discussions here. So I wanted to make sure we got some questions answered for people like me. And for those of you who know nothing about it, hopefully you go away learning a whole lot today. I'm inspired in part by Brother Andrew Hammer. I have his book, Observing the Craft, that our secretary gave to me to read. It's a wonderful book. And I have a section I'm going to read out of it, but I wanted to read you from the table of contents, give you an idea of what this book is about. I would recommend this. It's available on Amazon. It's good reading, I think, for any Mason, even if you're not really interested in TO. It makes you think. It makes you consider more about Masonry, and it has a different perspective. That's what attracted me to it. The chapters in here are, why does observing the craft matter? What is observance? Dealing with distractions, the pursuit of excellence, dress, ritual, the festive board, and the observant lodge. So he spends a great deal of time explaining what all gets in the way of being an observant lodge before he gets to actually talk about what is an observant lodge. So a very good book. And I do have a panel that's present today, and I'm going to be asking them questions just in order. And I'll get to the questions in a sec, but I wanted to read this just to give a sort of a background here. This is from Observing the Craft. In the simplest sense, when we use the term observance in relation to any discipline or philosophy, we are talking about a careful attention to and practice of what might be considered the essential tenets of that discipline. Another way to explain it is the effort to do everything involved with that discipline as correctly as possible to the best of your ability. In the Masonic sense, observance means seeing to it that certain methods and characteristics of Masonic labor are carried out to the highest standard that can possibly be attained by a lodge. I'm not talking about a specific ritual or unified form of practice, but rather to the maximum degree of performance that can be expected from any given lodge, whatever their ritual or practice may be. And Brother Hammer, who was instrumental in starting moving toward the Traditional Observance Lodge in Virginia, and then actually forming a Traditional Observance Lodge in Alexandria. He tries to set forth what it is they're setting out to do. And as they state over and over again, this is not in any way contrary to the ancient landmarks or Anderson's constitutions or anything about what Masonry has been in the past. There is nothing about TO, according to him, and we'll hear from others today to talk about it. There's nothing about traditional observance that violates any Grand Lodge statutes or does anything contrary to the spirit of Masonry. In fact, it's a way of doing Masonry better and more in line with what a majority of the people, myself included, thought Masonry was going to be when they joined. And I would certainly agree that Masonry, as wonderful as it is, to me, has fallen short of what I thought it was going to be. And in my own way, I'm sure most of you, because you're involved in Research Lodge and you're interested in digging deeper here, most of you probably think, well, Masonry isn't everything I want it to be, and set about to make it better. Traditional observance, to my mind, codified that idea and is trying to capture something that we all feel is lacking, but it's hard to put our finger on. I think Brother Hammer believes he put his finger on it and said, here's what we're going to do. So we're going to explore that with the questions, and I would love you all to explain. I'll ask questions to get you started. If you want to expand, go right ahead. If you answer another question I have, I'll just skip over it. But I've tried to ask enough questions to get some good answers from those who actually have experienced it, for those of us who haven't, so we understand better. I want to say I have 8 steps to excellence, and I put this out on the group page for people. This is a short PDF that Brother Hammer published on behalf of Alba Lodge number 222 in the District of Columbia. But these are 8 steps to excellence, the Observant Lodge. This is a short, like 2-page, 3-page PDF on what the steps are to bring about an Observant Lodge. So I'm just going to go ahead and cover these steps, and then we'll get into the questions. Number 1 is guarding the West Gate. Number 2, being proficient in Masonic ritual and law. Number 3, a commitment to advance brethren through the degrees by mutual and genuine effort. Number 4, the selection and advancement of officers should be by merit alone. Number 5, dressing your best for lodge. Number 6, a lodge must offer quality assemblies and be willing to pay for them. Number 7, the return of a sense of awe to our ceremonies. And number 8, Masonic education at every meeting. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get into the questions, because I think I've talked enough to give you all a little background. And by all means, if I don't cover something, if one of our participants, one of you who are observers here, have a question at the end, feel free to ask. And if any of our panelists think I left something out, they're welcome to bring it up at the end. But I do think I will cover the majority in the questions here. So I'll start with Brother Greg and ask him. And if you don't have a good answer, by all means, just say, okay, and I'll go to the next guy. But I think each one of you can answer. I may come back and ask the same question more than once, but I'll just sort of see how this goes. So, Brother Greg, how is traditional observance Masonry different from regular Masonry?
Well, brother, a couple things about my experience as well. I worked at McCoy Publishing, a Masonic supply company, for about 5 years, traveling across the country, and worked with Worshipful Brother Steve McCall, who's the president and owner. He is a member of my lodge, and I worked on a couple different books with him. I edited the book, The Craft Driven Lodge, by Dan Hrinko, who is one of the founding members of Arts and Sciences Lodge up in outside of Columbus, Ohio. I think it's in Hilliard, and had been friends with Andrew Hammer for about 10 years now. And the interesting thing when you come to the TO experience or the Traditional Observance Lodge, it really, the basis of it is, it's all about whatever the intention is of what your lodge experience wants to be. So with what kind of inspired Andrew in writing his book was he basically looked at what Masonry was doing or what they were doing in their lodge and how was it meeting their expectations. So when you sit down and look at what you're doing within your lodge, whether you're just coming in and having a standard lodge meeting where everyone shows up, they open the lodge, stumble through the ritual, read the minutes, then everybody goes downstairs and hangs out or eats dry chicken and watery green beans, is that really meeting what your experience or your expectations was going to be? And that was where the Traditional Observant Lodge kind of got its momentum. So these lodges, these brothers started coming together and developing ideas and taking inspiration from what lodge was like in the past, where they were meeting together and having formal or informal discussions within lodge rather than just listening to a speaker. Coming dressed to lodge wearing a tuxedo rather than just wearing a button-down shirt and jeans, those types of things. So looking at what they wanted out of their experience and how can they change what they're doing. And eventually this just got grouped together in this idea of the Traditional Observance or TO Lodge. That's kind of where it came from.
All right, thank you. Brother Neil, what is the Chamber of Reflection?
The Chamber of Reflection is a space, from my experience at our lodge building in Stratford. The Chamber of Reflection is a space outside of the lodge room that we use for new admissions to sit and reflect on their lives. Now, I say it as for new admissions because 10 years ago or 8 or 10 years ago, when I first was associated with the Observant Masons in Stratford, I went to their discussion group. This was before we had a lodge. And our now Grand Master had invited me to this discussion group. And when I got there, they gave me a pencil and a piece of paper and they said, we're going to take you to the Chamber of Reflection. And like I said, it's a small, dark room lit by a candle with a simple desk and a simple chair and some artifacts in the room, an hour, like a time hourglass and bones and maybe some chemical symbols. And I was told to reflect on my life and write down on the paper what was important to me and what was important to me for coming to this meeting. So we used the Chamber of Reflection even before we had our Observant Lodge set up. Now that we have our Observant Lodge up and running, the Chamber of Reflection is used for candidates for degrees, initiation, passing, and raising, to sit and reflect on their space in life before they embark on the experience. And we would put somebody in the Chamber of Reflection for as much as 45 minutes, kind of however long you want. When I did it before this discussion group, I sat down and I started writing, and I forget now, but I ended up writing 2 or 3 pages of thoughts, and nobody reads them at our lodge. They're your own thoughts for you to put down on paper. They're sealed in an envelope and are put in the archives of the lodge. But it's meant to be a purging process to prepare you to enter what we could like to call the sacred space of open lodge for the degree experience that you're about to have. And that was a good picture.
Thank you. Yeah. Give it a little background. I don't have a lot of visual aids, but I'll use what I have. Okay, Brother Brad. How do you dress for stated meetings and degree nights?
Yeah, so obviously my experience is from Lexington Lodge here in Kentucky, and just so I can get that out there before any other questions. So we are not a traditional observant lodge. We do not call ourselves a TO or a traditional observance. We call ourselves a heritage observance lodge. And I can get into the reasons why on that later. But for us, every stated meeting is suit and tie. We are not very strict on tuxedos. However, we do require tuxedos for all officers at installation ceremonies. However, every meeting, all members, visitors, and officers are required to wear suit and tie or coat and tie. If we have a visitor that reaches out beforehand that wants to come and visit with us, I actually chair that committee on connecting them and inviting them. And part of my response to them is our required dress code. And degree work, typically degree work, all the officers wear tuxedos. And if you don't have a tuxedo or can't afford a tuxedo, or if there's different reasons, we look at options to getting you one, or minimum a black suit, white tie, or excuse me, black suit, white shirt, black tie. And that is how we operate in Lexington.
All right. I'll say that's not too different from Virginia lodges, although most of us, we wear tuxedos at the state-ins, and occasionally we'll wear them at the Master Mason's degree. So I got the impression that it was from Andrew Hammer's book that it was tuxedos or very formal dress all the time. I will say there are lodges that have like casual nights, or they're very they're not very strict if a member shows up in just a polo or whatever. And I've heard a lot of back and forth. If I could say this, I've heard a lot of back and forth about this, but I lean towards what the TO mindset is if you can't be bothered to dress up for lodge, why are you there? The whole idea is to make it more important and more significant. And if you don't make the effort to at least look presentable, I mean, what you're wearing, Brad, a lot of people ought to see wear to lodge. Mm-hmm. I mean, collar shirt. But then the other argument seems to be like, well, I'd rather have somebody showing up in the meeting, and if they're put out and they don't feel comfortable wearing a tie, they're going to stay home because they have to wear a suit. Well, then we don't have them in the meeting. But I guess you weigh the question of, is it significant enough and important enough that we dress up, or are we just worried about making sure people show up? So it is an interesting argument.
Yeah, and for us, from the experience that we have, this has been a movement to get to where we are today, obviously. I mean, about a 10-year movement, and dress code has taken a long time to get everybody on board. But, we have the reputation and the understanding really from the entire state that, our dress code for visitors is coat and tie. We've had gentlemen show up in, a button down or a polo, and we've certainly not escorted them off the premises or told them, get the hell out of here, you can't come in. But we have pulled them aside and had the conversation. If you wish to visit with us again, this is our dress code. And those men have come back in the proper dress. So we're, there's definitely no being rude or inconsiderate, but I would suspect if we had somebody come 3, 4, 5 times and not in dress code, we would at some point have that conversation.
Okay.
But again, for us, the dress code started 10 years ago just for officers, and it was a tie. And then it was a couple years down after officers got comfortable, we started adding coat and tie for the officers. And then it changed into coat and tie for all members, and then shifted to all members and visitors. So, and that is, it's clearly, we have a really professional website. Our master this year runs a marketing company, and our website is phenomenal. And our website has those details. If you want to come and visit with us, when do we meet? Where do we meet? What are the requirements to meet? So there's a good understanding, and I would say we've probably over the years lost some guys, some active members, and really when you say active, 1 or 2 meetings a year active that would have came out, but we average 35 to 40 members a meeting at our lodge, and everybody comes dressed to impress. And we start that habit, for us, and this may be a question later down the road, but for us, when we have prospect members that are thinking about joining, they wait 3 to 6 months before they ever petition. That first time they ever step foot in lodge, they have a coat and tie on. So we start building those habits very early on.
I want to add now, and by the way, and when I ask these questions, I try to come up with as interesting questions and thought-provoking questions. I'm going to refer to regular Masonry as the Masonry. Obviously, we're all regular Masons, but I wanted to distinguish TO versus, or what you all are practicing. I like what'd you call it? Legacy Masonry?
We call it heritage observance.
Heritage observance. When I say regular on Masonry, I'm referring to all the other lodges that are not currently practicing this.
Those other
Slight
people.
on anybody, everybody
No,
else.
just
Well, myself
just
included.
playing. Just
So let me ask,
Brother
Yes,
Douglas, if I could
please.
just jump in, just for an additional comment. Our lodge is very strict on dress code. Our officers
Okay.
wear white tie and tails, and members and visitors wear black tie tuxedos. And that's why this morning I'm dressed in a white shirt with a black tie. And if you've seen me at other lodge meetings online, particularly when I go to something that is an observant meeting like Lexington #1, I'll be dressed the same. But I've got to tell you that you'll likely get to it, but education is important to us. And one of the best speakers we've ever had at Templum Lucis Lodge is a brother Jared Shapira from Winnipeg, Manitoba. And the topic of his conversation was dress and etiquette, Masonic dress and etiquette. And when I first saw that, I thought, what a lame discussion for a lodge meeting. Like, how do you make that interesting and edifying? And I have to tell you that in the several years we've been doing this now, it's maybe one of the best conversations we've ever had. Him telling us what's the difference between getting dressed up and not dressed up. And it's not that everybody has to every lodge has to have a dress code, but the reason why we have a dress code in observant Masonry. Exceptional conversation.
Excellent. I was going to ask Brad, all of the regular lodges, the ones that aren't yours, what's the typical dress code in Kentucky then? Because I'd say you're almost on par with Virginia, what you do and what most Virginia lodges do. So for other Kentucky lodges, what would be typical? So we have a comparison.
Sorry for the delay. I'm brewing coffee in the background.
Okay.
I didn't want you to hear the machine. I have a machine in my office area, so I'm sorry. Yeah, so in Kentucky, I'd say, and I've had the pleasure to serve. I've been district deputy grand master. I've been appointed Grand Lodge officer. I'm going to serve on the education committee next year. So I've had the chance to travel a lot. So I feel like I can answer that question comfortably. I'd say the general rule of thumb in Kentucky is jeans and a polo or khakis and a polo. We have certain lodges in far rural Eastern Kentucky that, dress code is one of the things that it's whatever you're wearing at home at the time. We have other lodges that, are very similar to Lexington. For certain events and functions, they do require coat and tie. Or there's one lodge in Louisville, which is where our Grand Lodge is, that does require tuxedos at like an installation service or a Master Mason's raising. But I'd say generally, it's going to be nice pair of jeans or slacks and a polo. I will say there's in more of the metropolitan area, so Lexington, Louisville, Central Kentucky, Northern Kentucky. So actually, I live right across the river from Cincinnati. And in those areas right now, we're starting to see much more of a shift to a minimum of shirt and tie. Not necessarily a suit, but as I've traveled and do travel, I see a lot more brothers wearing ties. And I think Brother Neil was just talking about, the education or the dress code discussion. That was part of our Grand Lodge educational series 2 years ago. So we actually, when we traveled the state, the education committee talked about proper dress. And, sometimes that's an uncomfortable conversation when you, at least in Kentucky, you get down to the mountains of Kentucky where bib overalls are common, farmers and coal miners, that's their neck of the woods. But they did a really good job, and we continue to kind of talk with brothers about, I think you even kind of mentioned it, we dress for the occasion, we dress for the respect of our brothers, we dress for the event. Why do we dress any differently for a wedding or a baptism or something like that, and then go to lodge in jeans and a t-shirt? So, I'd say there's a movement shifting in Kentucky, but there's still a good population of, jeans and a polo. I'll tell you, 10 years ago, 7 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, you'd see a lot more lodges dressed down. But we've had some pretty good leadership that has kind of said, jeans, flip-flops, all caps, dirty, torn shirts, just not appropriate. So actually some of the lodges, when I was district deputy here in Northern Kentucky 4 years ago, some of the lodges in my district actually kept coat jackets on site for members. So if somebody was coming from work and running late, they could pop a coat on. They'd keep 5 or 10 in a closet. They go to, Goodwill or a hand-me-down store or something, or just go to, a store and buy a bunch. and they'd keep different sizes of jackets in a coat closet. And when you came to lodge, I had one brother, one of my lodges was a true Mason. He worked with brick and mortar, and he'd come dirty, but he'd come with a shirt out, and he'd change a shirt out, and he'd put on a jacket, and he'd look presentable for his lodge. So.
Very good. Okay, I that's good, because I want to draw the distinction of how you are not. You are the exception if it's common in Kentucky, like you say.
Yeah, we are the only, and I not this is not a good thing or a bad thing, but we are the only lodge like our own in the state of Kentucky, and I would comfortably say that. There are other lodges that have come and visited that are taking back learning best practices and sharing best practices, but we are the only lodge. We're the only heritage style lodge in the state.
Very good. Brother James Buckhorn, what sort of meals do you serve, and do you pay for each meal at the time?
Yeah, so I'll talk about two of the lodges here in Indiana, Crown Martyrs and Lodge Vitruvian, which some of you may be familiar with. Typically, there's a festive board after the meal with both of those lodges. And as far as I've been attending for the last few years, it's always been off-site. At one of those lodges, you pay $50, and then the lodge kind of covers everything and tip and just takes care of it. And it's a nice way to just, you're going to pay $50 for your meal.
$50 just to defray expenses.
Yes.
The lodge picks up. Wow. Okay. And that's every meeting. Every meeting you would.
Yes, and I think something that maybe we haven't touched on, and in my experience, it's the frequency of observant lodge meetings is Pentalpha meets 6 stateds a year, and that's a lot for a TO lodge in Indiana. And then the other 3 lodges plan to meet four times a year or 5. So each experience is a pretty, it's a calendar event. You put it on your calendar, you're looking forward to it for a long time. I think it's that way across much of the United States from my experience. So it is worth it. You're putting on your suit, you're going to lodge. The ritual starts when I put on my suit, I go to lodge, I see incredible Masonic education at the meeting or after the meeting at the festive board. I will say in Indiana, Crown Martyrs and Vitruvian do it differently, with Crown Martyrs doing education in the middle, often flying in a renowned speaker or having someone drive in from close by who has something really special to hear. Vitruvian will fly in people from out of state in non-COVID times, and they've got an incredible restaurant upstairs. It's tiled off, and we have the wait staff trained to come in, take our orders, and then bring the food. You have the speaker, and then they leave. And the speaker speaks while you're having an incredible meal in a very nice restaurant where everyone's wearing a tuxedo or a black suit.
Excellent. I just want to point out by way of comparison or contrasting here, for those of you who don't have research lodges in your state or you're not familiar with them, Virginia Research Lodge is one of 5 research lodges in Virginia, and we own 4 times a year. And you must be a member of a regular lodge and maintain your membership in that blue lodge, and then you affiliate with the research lodge. We meet 4 times a year, and we're focused solely on Masonic education. We don't make new Masons. You must belong to a regular lodge, and you must maintain your membership, by the way, in that regular lodge. So we are, in a sense, similar. Of course, we're older. We're 50 some years old. Research lodges have been around longer than the TO movement, but we do have some similarities in the sense of we meet less often. But again, it's a separate body. It's not the only one. I guess, let me ask you, James, since I have you up, do you typically belong just to a TO lodge, or do you belong to another lodge as well? And what's typical?
Me personally?
Yes.
So I think a lot of us, and I shared a quote in the chat that I'll share now, and that'll kind of explain a little bit of it. Traditional observance or observant Masonry will ruin regular Masonry for you, but in the best way. You can't unring a bell. And in my experience, a lot of these guys that I bring into a TO lodge just to visit, I don't have the intent of wanting them to join the lodge because it's up to each man. But a lot of these guys that just go to observant lodge once, they go, oh my God, this is what I've been missing. Where this is the Masonry I read about. This is what I thought Grandpa was doing or great grandpa was doing. So I was I joined a non-TO lodge, and I think it's sad that a lot of TO lodges don't necessarily do degree work. They're not really made to bring people in. But no, I'm a member of other lodges as well.
Okay, thank you. And is that typical then?
Yes, I'd say that's extremely typical. In
Okay.
Indiana, it's, we're all beholden to the Grand Lodge of Indiana. I will say a couple of lodges have set their cost to join, their joining cost being a few $100s more than you'd see at a regular lodge, where maybe it would be just, enough to cover the cost of the apron and materials. So it's kind of, you're gonna have some skin in the game if you want to join.
Okay. That's interesting. So in that sense, although it's not, and I don't want to try and say a research lodge is a TO lodge, I'm just pointing out how we are similar. And in that sense, it is where you belong to a regular lodge. And you say they don't go out of their way to bring in new Masons. They can, but you're saying they generally don't. That's not.
As a generality, I'd say that's correct.
Wow.
The lodge that I'm senior warden of, Pentalpha, it's a little bit different because it's a lodge that almost died a few years ago. And we've had a group of brothers come in and have kind of converted it into a more TO style lodge, progressively getting more and more. I've got the picture right there of our altar, right above it.
Okay, let me go and cut to Joe. He had his hand up for a little bit, but thank you, James. Joe, please.
No, I was thank you. I was actually going to touch on what James was saying, because he brought up a really good point in that, and I'll give you my first experience ever with an observant lodge. I went to a lodge in DC, and I left from work, and work for me at that time was like a blazer and a button down, no ties or anything like that. And somebody had recommended I go to this lodge and check it out. So I drove across the bridge and went there. And I showed up and said hello, and they were handing out drinks and stuff, and I was meeting people. And the master came and stopped me. He's like, "Hey, just so you know, we require a coat and tie." And I was like, "Oh man, I only have a coat. I don't have a tie." And they said, "Great." So they walked me to the closet, and they had jackets and ties and things like that. And but they were actually really strict about, you got to put a tie on before you come in this room. And I think for most people that would turn them off, but I thought that was really awesome. That was my first experience with, green beans, not green beans masonry. And, I thought that, like I said, it struck a chord with me. And then, so I started going to that lodge quite a bit. And just to touch on what James was saying, after a couple of meetings, I said, "Hey, this is the kind of masonry I actually want to start practicing. This is way different than what I'd seen before. And I'm actually, this is up my alley." So I asked for a petition, and I said, "I want to affiliate." And one of the brothers came up to me and said, who I'd known for a while. He said, "No, that's not the way it works here." He's like, "You start coming, and you get to meet all the brothers here, and we get to know you really, really well, and then we'll give you a petition. When we think you're ready to join." And remember, I was already a Master Mason, so I was just joining to affiliate. But it had been a good 8-9 months before they gave me a petition to affiliate. And at the time, I felt like it was so, and I know for a lot of people, maybe some on this call, they'll think, well, that's really crappy and really exclusive and stuff like that. But it was really a happy moment for me when I felt like I earned that petition. Because from then on, it was a very smooth sailing process to become a member of that lodge. And I felt so invested in that lodge and the practices that they were getting into that it wasn't a turnoff for me at all.
Cool. All right. Brother James has his hand up.
So I touched briefly on Pentalpha Lodge, where I'm senior warden. And I think one of the things that maybe sets us apart from a lot of TU lodges that I've seen is that, our primary focus, I'd say, if you say there's 4 flavors of observant masonry in Indiana, then Pentalpha's is the candidate experience, and just, doing everything you can think of to make sure that the candidate, what we do is all about the candidate, in masonry. It should be all about the candidate, right? For the most part. So Pentalpha is all about the candidate. I can't say that You know, these other lodges have been bringing in a lot of people. That's not really what they're designed to do. And again, I go to all these lodges because I love all the different flavors we have here.
Okay. I want to say this, and that's one of the things in reading the book that struck me, and I have had this discussion with me in my own lodge. We have 3 candidates. Great. We're going to do 3 initiatory degrees, and we're going to do each one, and the guy's going to sit down, and we bring in the next guy, and he's going to sit out and then you'll just do the EA lecture. And I want to say this, just from my experience, if I'm going to the trouble of joining a Masonic lodge, I'll wait an extra month to get my own dang initiation. I think it does an incredible disservice, especially for the Master Mason's degree, but it's more especially actually for the EA because that's their first introduction to things. But I don't like multiple candidates, and I don't care how backed up your calendar is. In reality, if it's not a quality experience for each candidate, what difference does it make if you hurry up and bring them all in? I'm sorry. Is the rush to get them into Masonry, or is it to get them to experience Masonry to the point that they want to come back? That's why I'm totally dead set against mass initiations, which is apparently, sadly, every 3 years in Virginia, we have a 1 day class. And it's just obscene. 50 men coming in, 50 to 100 men sitting on the sidelines, and one guy gets to go up there and go through the degrees, and you're just watching it. You might as well, I'll step on toes. You might as well be a Northern Jurisdiction Scottish Rite Mason and get a DVD to watch of the degrees. I'm sorry. If you're not experiencing it, you're not being initiated. And that's just my take. Brad, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I've been sitting here quietly, just absorbing, but
I was going to call you. You're the next one to call a question, but go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, great. I mean, we've hit a lot of my hot button topics.
Okay.
And when we talk about traditional observance masonry, the first thing I'll point out, you open mentioning Andrew Hammer's book, Observing the Craft. And if you notice, nowhere in the book does Andrew refer to it as traditional observance masonry. He just calls it observance masonry. And I've had a conversation with him about this on a couple of occasions. And he makes a very good point. He said there's nothing traditional about it. What's traditional in your lodge is not going to be traditional in my lodge. What's traditional in your jurisdiction is not going to be traditional in the next jurisdiction. It's just observing the craft. It's an observant lodge. And we've talked about, the dress. And most observant lodges, from my experience, are tuxedos. Some are white tie and tails. Some of them are just traditional tuxes. My lodge, just traditional tuxes, black tie, black vest. But the dress that's window dressing. The observance comes in showing respect or that reverence to the craft that it deserves, to really exploring the meaning of masonry and the degrees. So the dress is not the important part. It's what you bring to the lodge, what you bring to that meeting. So there should be this sense of decorum, a solemnness to the lodge. You're there for a reason. You understand the symbolism of a tiled lodge and being able to shut out the outside world, and you are creating a sacred space. So you could have a TO lodge where brothers just showed up in open collar and sport coat. Fine, that's fine. I'm not going to judge. I do kind of draw a line. I've only worn jeans to a lodge once in my life, and that was because I was asked to attend at last minute to visit a lodge. But if that's the culture in your lodge and you want to go for that, look, as long as they're clean and you're dressing presentably, that's fine. If you're showing up in a wrinkled t-shirt and dirty jeans with holes in it and stuff, I just don't think there's any excuse for that. The excuse that, I just came from work. Great. Throw a jacket in the car. Put it on at the lodge. I know a lot of brothers that would leave a shirt and jacket hanging in the lodge so they'd have something to change into when they got there. Personally, I kept a tuxedo hanging behind my office door at the office just in the event that I couldn't run home and change into a tux. So there's never really an excuse for walking into a lodge looking like you just picked your clothes up off the bedroom floor and threw them on. But anyway, I'll get off my soapbox there. But the point is that observant masonry is really more about observing the craft. The rest of it is window dressing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I just want to take a detour for a minute, if I could. We have a brother, F. I just see F. I'm going to ask you to at least introduce yourself. Let me get your name, if you don't mind, since I don't even see you. Brother F.
it looked like you left.
Looks like he left.
Oh my. Okay. Well,
I like how you do that, Chris. Clean them out.
I'm trying. I mean, I don't want to interrupt the proceedings for that, but well, okay. While I'm at it, Brian, not you, Brian, the other Brian. Can I ask your name, please, brother? Not Brian Smith, but Brian with just Brian. And I realize not everybody knows what their name is when they sign in, but I'd at least like to see a first and last name. Brian, who's just Brian on here. Hello.
My name is Brian Franksane. I'm a past master of Elwood Parian Lodge, number 599 in Elwood City, Pennsylvania, under the jurisdiction of Pennsylvania, Grand Lodge, Pennsylvania.
Awesome.
I am the sitting secretary.
I'm glad to have you here, brother. I'm just checking on people. That's all. Thank you for coming. Okay. Yeah, and F cleared out. That's funny. All right, then. Going back to Brother Matt Parker, what are your dues for your lodge?
The dues for our lodge are, for an observant lodge, I think they're very low. It's $200 per year. That is probably the lowest I've heard of in an observant lodge. But we do not include meals or anything extra there. That really goes for bringing in speakers, things of that nature. While a lot of other observant lodges incorporate festive boards and meals and things of that nature into their dues structure, which to me, it makes sense because you're not going to have 100% of membership attend every festive board, but it really offsets the cost and helps.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So just say two. Now that I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep it straight. You're in North Carolina, correct?
Correct.
Okay. $200 for your lodge. And what's typical for another lodge in North Carolina? What's typical?
Well, I'll give you an example. Sophia, 767 in the western part of the state, their dues are 365 days a year. And I love the rationale behind that. They said, is masonry worth $1 a day to you?
I'm sorry, $365?
$365 for the year. And that includes
For
their,
360. Okay.
yeah.
Oh,
but
they're also like a traditional observance lodge, or
they are an observant lodge, yes.
okay. No, I'm asking for just a regular blue lodge.
Oh, a regular lodge, just a regular
Yes.
blue lodge.
Just for
my
comparison's sake.
They're
Yeah.
ridiculously low. They're normally around 120, between 120 and 150.
Okay. I would say that's typical for Virginia too. So that's a valid question. What's ridiculous? If every lodge charges between $100 and $150, you can't really say it's ridiculous, but yes, I understand. We do seem to sell it a little cheap. $10 a month. That's
Let me clarify
not
that.
even, that's barely lunch. That's not even dinner anymore. That's one lunch a month. Eating out. So go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, Richard. I'm sorry.
Clarify this.
I'm gonna hold on, Richard. I'll get to you in a minute. I see your hand up. I don't want you to let you know I'm forgetting about you. I'm trying to manage both here. Please wrap up your point, and I'll get to Richard. Go ahead.
All right. So just very quickly, the reason why I say they're ridiculously low. Many lodges right now across North America, and even some in Europe, are struggling just to keep the doors open. And the membership just refuses to pay the dues. And they're afraid that if they raise the dues, that men will not petition to join the lodge.
Or they'll demit.
Right. Now,
The guys who aren't paying their dues now will demit.
Okay.
Yes.
but if you have a brother who's experiencing financial hardship, then the lodge remits his dues. I mean, you're not going to let a brother go because they're going through financial hardship. That's not masonry. But to keep the dues artificially low in the hopes of attracting new dues-paying members just to keep the lights on, that's a fallacy, and it's not going to end well for that lodge.
I totally agree. Honestly, saddens me that we had a case where we had a brother who was a 46-year Mason. I don't know how it is in North Carolina. In Virginia, if you are a 50-year Mason, you automatically become a, and I'm losing, it's not an honorary member, but you become there's a term, I'm sorry.
It's
Somebody tell
honorary,
me.
a Masonic veteran.
Not Masonic veteran, that's it, veteran. Yes. If you are a 50-year member in Virginia, you no longer pay dues to the Grand Lodge or to the lodge. The Grand Lodge no longer collects the dues, and then the lodge can stop collecting your dues. We had a 46-year member who fell on hard times, and he asked for a demit, and rather than remit his dues for the last 4 years, we let him demit. I can't understand that. I really can't. I mean, I'm sorry, if the lodge can't cup $400, $500 for a few years just to keep him around long enough to be a veteran. I mean, if you're 35 years in and you're not going to be able to pay, I can see it. If it's not a one-time thing. We've had brothers in financial hardship. I'm talking about somebody they're retired and they're on fixed income and they have to cut something, so they cut lodge. If you're that close to being a veteran and not paying dues ever again, carry him over the threshold. It's 4 years, but that's just me. Okay, I'm sorry. I have several people with their hands up. Richard Peak, you were first. Please go ahead. And unmute.
Okay. I've been listening to all the questions, and here in the Dominican Republic, it's kind of mixed. We have, and I visited a lot of the lodges here. We have the majority meet very formal with tie and coat at least. And there are lodges that meet informally as well, but not to the point where you're in flip-flops and holy jeans, but they require at least a nice dress pant and a polo shirt because it's very warm here. So, and the lodges here don't go what they say dark. We meet every week. Before COVID, we would have a lodge meeting every week. So in the summer, when it's close to 90 plus in here, they go to the polo shirt and the pants. But if it's ritual work, it's mandatory here that you do your ritual work in full dress, which is here a white shirt, black tie, black suit, basically. Some will wear the more formal tux, but it's very formal for the ritual work. As far as the other things, here we have the lodge that I am the worshipful master of is a York Rite English speaking lodge. Most of the lodges here practice the Spanish or the Scottish Rite, and they have the Chamber of Reflection. We do not have that, but it's very similar to what was described by Neil. The same, you go down into the basement, it's a small dark room, we have the candle lit, we have the skull, we have the various chemical signs on the wall, we give them the 3 questions, and they reflect. So it's very similar. As far as the rest, the dues here are similar to the United States, around 100 to 150 for the blue lodges. And even at that price, like has been mentioned, we do have brothers that say that that's too much or I can't afford it. And you have to look at it on a case by case basis. Are they in a hardship? Are they a pensioner? Are they have they been laid off and they can't make their payment? So, but 150, if you divide it over 12 months, really is not a lot of money for a blue lodge, and that's just, it doesn't help. If you have maintenance or anything, you have to kind of say, hey, we need a special collection, and that's really not what you want to do. You want to be able to have in your lodge some finances to cover those unexpected expenses that you know you might not have at every meeting, that would include your festive board and the other things that a normal lodge would function as. So that's how it is here.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate that. Sounds like you're already doing what we would we consider traditional observances you're already doing. Brother Brad had your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in really quick on the discussion. So first, you were asking about average dues, and because I'm a data junkie, I have those for Kentucky for 2020. So out of the 350 lodges in Kentucky, our average dues are $51.31. Now, also note
Wow.
of that $51, $27.50 is required to go to our Grand Lodge as an assessment. So dues, the average dues incoming to lodges is less than $25. Second piece I wanted to mention, somewhat similar, I guess, to Virginia, but a little bit different. When we have members in Kentucky hit 50 years, they're declared a free member. However, per our Constitution, it does not allow them or does not remove them from paying lodge fees. They do not have to pay the assessment, but lodges are still able and allowed to ask them to pay any lodge fees. So if you have again, $27.50 is our assessment. If let's say your dues are $127.50, and once they hit that 50 mark, they could still be asked to pay that remaining $100. Not a lot of lodges do that. We do at number one. But not a lot of lodges do. But what I wanted to share around annual dues, it's a little bit different than what I've already heard from some of the other brothers talk. So our annual dues built into our bylaws are recalculated and reevaluated every single year. We don't have a standing, we have a standing rate for 12 months, but every year they come up. And we reevaluate those based on what our budget is for the year and how many members we have. Not how many active, not how many 50 year, and not how many whatever. Entered apprentices to the oldest master mason in our lodge. We take our total annual budget and we divide it by active members, and that is our lodge. Those are our dues. So for the last 2 years, we've been able to retain that at $240. However, we expect that probably to jump up to $260 or $280 in the next year or two, because we are actively trying to get smaller at our lodge. We're not kicking anybody out, but we know in the next 5 to 8 years, we're going to lose a lot of guys to old age and death. But for us, what has been really simple, and it's allowed per our Constitution, and we've put it into our bylaws, and we've actually had other lodges adopt the same feature, is we just take our total operating budget. What is it for the year? What are we going to pay? And our dues take care of everything for the brother except for meals at a meeting. Our meals are catered, and we meet 24 times a year, twice a month. And we have a caterer right next door that provides our meal. It's $10 a brother. But our dues take care of everything else. We have an annual festive board in the fall, which, we've hosted the Masonic Restoration Foundation before. We've done the Masonic Society. Those are all free to our members. We take care of those costs. We also typically publish a book for our lodge each year of all of our educational presentations. We combined it into a book. So actually what I'm using for reference today is one that we did a couple years ago called the Lexington Experience. And it talks about how we got to where we are today with a lot of other mumbo jumbo. But all of that is free to our members. It's all part of those dues, but our operating budget is, I don't know, $15,000, $16,000, $17,000 a year. We just take that and divide it by active members. And that's how we operate every year. If it changes, and again, if next year we lose 40 guys, our dues go up. If we gain 20 guys, our dues come down. But we have it built into our bylaws and with a committee that evaluates it every single November. Where are we at? What are we looking at? And then that is our dues. And again, for us, that has been approved, recognized by our Grand Lodge, so there's no issues there. We can have, it's still built in that we have to, give $27.50 of every member to the Grand Lodge, but it makes it very simple for us that we're not overspending or underspending. We are able to operate efficiently, and our brothers are taken care of.
Appreciate that. Brother Joe had your hand up.
Yeah, I had to take notes because there were so many things I wanted to chime in on. So I'll go from most recent to earliest.
Okay.
Brad said something fantastic, I think, which I think a lot of mainstream Masons will probably lose their minds hearing what Brad said. But when Brad was talking about actively getting smaller, outside of demits and deaths, that's really a tenet of observant Masonry, right? Is the whole concept of, the super lodge concept of the age of fraternalism of the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Sorry, guys, that was kind of a weird time for Masonry and other fraternal organizations because they grew so large that they kind of watered down everything within the craft, essentially, right? So my home lodge in Virginia, we have 220 members on the books. I could tell you 150 of those, if they walked by me on the street one day, I wouldn't know that they were Masons, and I would not know that they were members of my lodge. But observant Masonry really speaks to that, in that, and it's in Brother Andrew's book, you don't want a lodge of 100 people. If you've got more than 25 or 30 or 40 people, you're probably going to need to go start a new lodge, right? Because it's talking about forming those bonds of brotherhood with people. You honestly can't do that with 200 people. I'm sorry. We're just not built that way as human beings. But can you have that really intense brotherhood and bond with 25 or 30 people that all are there for the same exact reason that you are? Absolutely. And then just to touch on what Brother Richard said, talking about Masonry in South America and Mexico and things like that. For the American folks, if you've never visited South America, it's a whole different kind of Masonry. It really is. There is, the first time I ever went to a lodge in Mexico, there was a solemnity there that, this was before I knew what TO was, and they don't call it down there in Mexico. It's a whole different type of relationship and experience and egregore that you get in that lodge room that you just don't find outside of observant lodges here in the United States. And then the last thing I was going to touch on was what Matt said, where talking about the dues and things like that. I observant Masonry in the dues conversation gets a bad rap for being exclusive and trying pushing people out, but it really is you get what you pay for kind of thing when it comes to Masonry. If I'm going to one of Brad's lodges that pays $27 a year, I'm probably not going to expect much out of the Masonry there. So it really is you get what you pay for kind of thing. And I think to that point, for those that can pay dues at an observant lodge, your dues are going to be rewarded by a fantastic Masonic experience. You know what I mean? So it really is you get what you pay for kind of thing. And it's not a exclusivity thing that some of the naysayers say. So those are my thoughts I wanted to add.
Thank you. Brother Jose had a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, just a thought based on something that Brother Joe just said. It's interesting. My lodge is Federal Lodge number 1 in DC, which is kind of unique anyway, because DC as a grand jurisdiction, is so small physically, but it's very populous Masonically. I mean, there's 47, I think now, lodges in the District of Columbia, which is really just one city. But because it's DC, it's very transient. So my lodge, and it's also a very old lodge, has around 200 members, more or less. And just like Brother Joe said, I wouldn't recognize more than 30-ish if I saw them, at least in what I'm calling the before times. But the really interesting thing is that since the pandemic and since moving to things like this, and we now in DC even have a provisional ritual, so we can actually do some not just sort of like virtual happy hours. We can actually have like a lodge meeting online. Suddenly, it's funny how active a bunch of our long distance members who may have been members of Federal since the 70s, but then moved to Iowa or Arizona or something, and now they're logging in again. And I'm getting to know members all over the country now that we've kind of scattered to the winds, because this technology, which is very not traditional observance, is allowing us to sort of pick up some of the fraternal aspects.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, I concur. I wanted to say something to what Joe said. I've talked about in the Blue Lodge, well, we have just under 200 members now in Ocean View, but we have about 20 to 30. It's typical that 10% of your membership will show up on a regular basis throughout the year. And I like to say, I think we kind of rationalize things to justify them. And I say, well, for every member in my lodge, there's 10 brothers, even in my city or Hampton Roads, Norfolk, Virginia Beach area. We have some in Florida and other states, but for the most part, they're here physically. For every one brother here, I got 10 brothers out there. They all pay dues, and they allow us to keep going because they pay dues. But they're never involved, and they're not really in our thoughts unless we have a phone committee or something to keep up with them. So I feel like I'm trying to adjust my way of thinking, because I'm thinking we need to make more of an effort to get in touch with our 200 members who aren't coming so they don't feel totally left out. Some of them may be old. They may be too old to feel comfortable coming to the lodge. Some maybe just are out of the habit and they're not interested anymore, but they pay their dues. But in my mind, here's how I was thinking, and this is where I think a lot of regular Masons rationalize it is, well, as long as I got those 10 guys paying their dues, we can keep dues low. So those of us who show up can enjoy the benefits, but there's only 20 or 30 of us ever interacting year in, year out. But if we increase the dues and made it more of a thing that you want to show up, we don't need those 200 who don't care enough to do anything other than just pay their dues. If I love to try and bring them back in, and that's something I try to do in the several years, is draw some of these brothers back into the lodge. But in reality, most of them have no interest in coming back. But if it's a question of I need to pay the bills and I can't pay it without these other guys out there, then why don't we just increase the dues among the ones who are here and make it worthwhile for them? And then we're more in keeping with what we're supposed to be. Because I totally get with the idea of if there's 20 or 30 of us, we all know each other. We can support each other in more ways than strictly financial. And by simply doubling the dues and letting people demit who are going to demit if they don't want to pay it, we're serving the purpose of Masonry for those who are invested enough to come and attend. I don't think I'd ever reach a point where I stop going to Masonry altogether. I don't see it for me, but I see 90% of our membership, there's one reason or another, they don't come back. And we spend a lot of time, the Grand Lodge spends a lot of time trying to figure out why aren't these guys showing up? Why are they demitting? And what can we do to bring them back? But never really, I think, address the real question. As much as they say we're trying to figure that out, we're not doing anything different. We're not going to change anything we do, but we got to figure out why that guy don't come anymore. So are we totally, and have we, because I'm guilty of this, are we rationalizing the status quo and perpetuating it instead of asking the hard questions? Which is why the whole reason I want to have this subject is to ask the hard questions. And like, maybe we could be doing things better. And if it's not for everybody, I don't want to take anything away from anybody. If you're happy with your lodge exactly the way it is, I want to leave you to it. And the guy who wants to pay $100 a year can join your lodge and get the green beans. And the guy who wants something more can come with us. And that way everybody gets what they want. Just my thought. Brother Matt, you had your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Sorry. I'm sorry. There was a guy, someone had their hand, who was it? Greg. I'm sorry. Yeah, you didn't have your hand up. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Greg. There's a hand up. There's a hand up icon. So yeah. I only see those. I don't see all your faces. I don't. So
sorry about that.
Go ahead, Greg.
Second time I've been on Zoom. So there's a couple things popping up and that I've been hearing in the conversations, and I want to point to one thing in particular. If you haven't, the first item that we had that I think the brothers who are either already involved with a TO lodge, or if they're looking to begin a TO lodge or convert their lodge into a TO lodge, or if you're just concerned with where Masonry is today and how our membership is, there's two excellent books written by John Bizak, who is a member at Lexington Lodge number 1, and I found one sitting on top of on top. It's Island Freemasonry. If you haven't gotten a copy of this, definitely it's worth a read. And the interesting item in there that John goes into is he talks about the split between English Masonry and American Masonry. Well, what he does in the book is we normally think that Masonry hit its peak and started coming down in the 1920s, the 1930s, the 1940s, but really the position that we're in, he proposes the idea that it actually stretches farther back to the development of the United States and the westward expansion and Manifest Destiny, so that Masonry was incorporated into the development of towns and cities as we colonized or as we spread across the United States. So we in American Masonry have focused more on a community outreach versus a more internal self-development. like you see in the English Masonry, Scottish Masonry, Irish Masonry. So where they're focusing more on the internal philosophical side of Masonry, American Masonry has grown into more of a community, into a community organization. That's one idea that he has in there, and he talks about how that develops. So within that idea, it's very interesting to take a look at that and see where we're at. He will step on your toes, just like Andrew Hammer's book will, and some of the other ones where they challenge your ideas of what modern Masonry is like. The other another item that I'd like to bring up, as far as how our lodges function, there was a study done in the Grand Lodge of Virginia a few years ago that studied the lifespan of a Mason in Virginia. Okay, how long a Mason will be a member within Virginia. And when they did the study, in Virginia, we have 3 methods of becoming a Master Mason. You have your traditional method, which is when you go through your 3 degrees separately. And in between those 3 degrees, you're memorizing the catechisms, the Masonic work. You show your proficiency in open lodge, and then you are conferred to the next degree. The second is a traditional method, or I'm sorry, excuse me, it is what we call the alternative method, which is basically a book that walks you through the ceremony and gives you the symbols and gives you some explanation behind it. That was developed basically for the people who have issues with memorizing, and it was a kind of a step around from having to stand in front of a group and basically do parrot masonry. The third method was the one-day conferral class. Now, in that study that they did, and this was a justification that the Grand Lodge used a few years ago trying to defend the one-day conferral class that a lot of people were pushing back against, was the lifespan of a Mason in Virginia is 3 years across all 3 of those methods. So the 3 methods, it didn't matter if you were a one-day Mason, a alternative Mason, or a traditional Mason. It was 3 years. In other states that I've talked to, they focused on the idea of, the one-day Masons. Those guys, they come, they get their degrees, and then they disappear, and then they never come back. But it was all 3 methods were the issue there. They were all at 30%. The retention was so low, it didn't matter. And what that goes back to is what type of experience we're having within our lodge. So there's the idea there, is that we have to concentrate on what type of experience we want to have within our lodges. And that's where this traditional observant lodge or these heritage lodges or observant lodges have really developed, because the focus is making an experience, and it makes it more exciting to come to lodge than to sit at home and watch TV that night.
Thank you, brother. I need to move along, but I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I want to try to get to more of my questions. So we are spending a lot of time on each topic, and I appreciate it, but I did want to at least touch on some of the things, but I'll go through those with their hands up real quick. Brother Matt, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll just make it brief. And Greg really mentioned something that I was going to bring up, and that was Dr. John Bizak's book, Island Freemasonry. And that's exactly it. A lodge should be a destination. So in any Grand Lodge jurisdiction, you have some lodges that are destination lodges. And other lodges, what happens when you form one of these lodges, whether it be observant lodge or just a lodge that is excellent in their ritual, excellent in their education and everything they do, that has an effect of bleeding over to other lodges. As brothers visit, they take bits and pieces back to their home lodges. And so these lodges, even an observant lodge, you may have brothers visit who are not really interested in being a member of an observant lodge, but they may see something that really strikes something with them, and they take that back to their lodge. And so lodges, surrounding lodges, grow and raise their standards based on the observant lodges or these lodges of excellence that are really doing quality work. And one thing that you'll see with these lodges, whether they be observant lodges or not, the lodges that are really doing quality work, they're having quality education, quality ritual. These are not the lodges that are concerned with growing membership. They're concerned with quality over quantity. And that's really where we should be as Masonry. We should be looking at the quality of who we're letting in the West Gate, not the quantity just to keep lights on.
I think Grand Lodges care more about quantity. Yes, I think the Grand Lodge cares more about quantity to continue to fund what they are doing rather than quality. And to be honest, and I'll go out on a limb here. Anybody from Grand Lodge here? Anyone? No? Okay.
I won't tell him.
Grand Lodge is, well, if anyone does, I know it's you. Grand Lodge wants to perpetuate the budget they have, so the Grand Down of Communication, they can spend a lot of our money on things that we don't particularly benefit from. If, as I said, in Ocean View, for example, and I don't think my lodge is necessarily bad, but they are kind of in the standard mode. If we have 200 members who pay $150 in dues, and we want to shrink that to 30 members who pay $250 in dues, and we meet the needs of everyone, we're fine with it. But if that is less money and less members for Grand Lodge, they will have a problem with it. So it is what it is. Brother Ade, please, you had your hand up and unmute.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and thank you for the talk today. So I just want to share my experience. Now, my mother lodge is warranted under the United Grand Lodge of England, and I'm a member of lodge in Ontario, Toronto. I live in Canada. Now, the difference is, I mean, if you mention observance, Masonry, as has been said, all the things that I mentioned there are things that are done, and that if you visit Scottish lodges, lodges wanted by Scotland or Ireland or England, so there's a dress code. You have to wear a tie. There's no way you're going to get into a lodge without a suit and tie. You can't even go in there with white socks. You can't just wear any, there has to be a black socks, there has to be black shoes. You can't just wear any tie. It has to be a black tie or a Masonic tie that has been given the permission to wear. So you can't just go and bring any Masonic tie from anywhere in the world and just wear it. Now, banquet or festival is an extension of the lodge. It's not tiled. Now, if we think that we're going to have non-Masonic visitors, say if it's a ladies' night where there are ladies there, there's certain things maybe we do at the banquet, we won't do it on that day. So, for example, we might not give a tireless toast because it has Masonic connotations in there. We might just give it inside the lodge room, but the other toast, we will give it there. The seating arrangement is also done in such a way that it's usually sort of like in, I would say, a U shape. So you have the senior warden and junior warden sitting at the ends of two sides of the left and right. They sit at the end of the table. And then you would have the worshipful master and other senior members sitting there. So there are certain strict things that are done, and they are standard, right? But I think in North America, over the years, I mean, there has been, I'll say there's some liberalism into how Masonry is done because you want to accommodate people. So, for example, you might go to a lodge where it might be rural and there might be farmers, people are just coming off the farm, but you don't just want to be so strict and say, oh, everybody should come in a tuxedo. The person might not even own a tuxedo. So I understand the observance sort of renaissance that is picking up, but in some places it's the norm. So when you say observance, sometimes like if you relate it to somebody in Europe, they might think, when you talk about it, they would think, okay, there's nothing new.
That's a valid point. And well, I mean, my target audience is mostly originally was Virginia Masons and American Masons, but yes, I'm so happy we have brothers from other countries here. We get the perspective, but I totally agree. There are places where this is just Masonry, but it is distinct within America. Joe, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Brother Ade, for that. I was actually going to touch on that as well. Another name for what's called observant Masonry in America is European concept. Masonry. So it really dovetails to a lot of the things that are old hat for you, right? But I wanted to touch on something for the guys that are members of TO lodges. Because James, I think you brought it up. I think my personal experience has been it normally looks like it's easier to just cut bait and start a new lodge than to try to convert a lodge that's has its current membership, or take a dying lodge and reinvigorate it in the observant style. I mean, what is everybody's thoughts on that? Is it easier to start?
Me, Joe, I do have a lot of questions, and I want to try and get through them, and you're kind of jumping ahead, if that's okay.
Oh, I didn't have your list of questions there.
I know. Well, I like surprising people, but I do want to at least get some of these in, and I appreciate everybody speaking at length, and this has been wonderful, but I wanted to try and cover the whole scope in this one meeting. So I'm going to ask you all to kind of be short in your answers, and maybe, I love the fact that y'all say, well, let me add to that, but we're going to be here for hours and hours. I don't mind, but I want to at least kind of cover at least all the big questions I had in mind so everybody gets the full picture. So I'm going to ask us to kind of shorten our answers a little bit. And then if we want to expand on it later, if we have time, we can. But I'm going to go to Neil and say, do you use incense in your lodge?
At this time, we do not. We've had some discussions about it. There are lots of observant lodges that do use incense to add to the atmosphere to help to create a special experience, a sense of awe.
Thank you. If any of our panelists, does your lodge use incense? And can you just say if that's been effective or not?
2 out of 4 of ours do, and yes, it's been effective.
It's very, thank you. Brother Greg, do you use candles or unusual lighting in your lodge?
In Richmond Randolph, we use candles in there. However, we had to change our candle holders because we found them in our building. Our building was constructed in 1785, so we have a lot of stuff that was just stacked into the building. So when we found these candlesticks that we dated back to like the late 1880s, that's when we switched over to using the candles. But when they first started with them, they had bad candle holders that were set on the altar, and we almost burned the building down.
Very good. Let's see. Brother Brad, do you use music for your meetings?
We do. We have a moment of reflection at the end of the meeting where we literally sit for 2 to 3 minutes and listen to music, reflect on whatever we're reflecting on. We also use music when we process in. We use music when we close. We use music in all of our degrees.
And is it? It's all recorded then, correct? Or is it live? Do you have musicians?
We have no, we do not have musicians. We've had musicians in the past for educational purposes and whatnot, but no, all of our music we have a professional sound system in our lodge hall, and we have a committee that handles all that.
Very good. I will say for Virginia lodges, we have in the degree, I do confer the installation service. That's one of the things I'm proud to be able to do. And we have a part for a musician. And you could actually install a musician lodge in Virginia as an officer. And I've only known one time where we actually had one. You would think he would be an organist or a piano player. And the Eastern Star does have a musician, and one of the ladies plays the piano. My wife's grandmother was a musician. I think she was the organist emeritus or whatever, because she's been doing it for like 60 years or some crazy thing. Ocean View had a violin player who was our musician for a couple of years, and it didn't work out. Go figure. But Brother Vincent Ogdebine was our musician. I installed him, and he lasted a couple of years. I guess he ended up just dropping out altogether. I was away from the lodge for a while before I came back, and I was wondering what happened. But we tried the idea of having a violinist. He did not play the piano. He did not know how. And we tried using violins. Just didn't work. So you have to be careful how you do this. I think pre-recorded is a better way to go. Let's see. Brother James. Is attendance better or worse than in a regular lodge?
I'd argue that it's much higher at almost all of them. Yeah.
Okay. And Brother Matt, is there a penalty if you miss a meeting?
No, but it is, I think, just common courtesy to notify the master or secretary, especially if you're an officer in the lodge. Notify them, give them some advance warning that you're not going to be there, rather than trying to open a lodge and you're missing your junior deacon or something like that, and then scrambling to get someone to fill the chair.
Right.
I think that's a common courtesy that should be extended to every lodge, not just observant lodges.
Well, I was thinking more just, I'm talking about regular, not even obviously an officer of any lodge should let the master know if he's not going to be there for a degree or whatever, but I'm talking about a regular member who's not in office.
Right.
Are they expected to attend? I've heard of people having to send letters if they can't attend.
So Chris, here's the thing. Everything in Masonry is of your own free will and accord, right?
In theory, yes.
If a lodge imposes any kind of penalty on a brother for not showing up, they're taking away that free will and accord. So I absolutely am vehemently against penalizing brothers for not showing up. If they don't want to show up, you know what? That's on them. That's fine. That's fine. For a courtesy to, some kind of notification so we know, but to penalize, no, that's absurd.
I can see your point. Okay. Brother, okay. Let me see who to ask here. Brother Neil, Brother Neil was a member or is a member of a TO lodge, and it was chartered as a new lodge. Is that correct? And can you talk a little bit about how did that come? I'll kind of combine a couple questions. Did you vote? Did you come from several lodges, or was it one lodge decided to go a new direction? Or briefly, how did that come about?
So it was started by a brother in the town of Stratford, where our lodge is located, and he had become aware of the observant Masonry movement and the Masonic Restoration Foundation, and started having discussion groups with some local Masons in Stratford. Then they talked about it, and it expanded out and expanded out. And I said earlier, I was invited to that group by our now Grand Master. I live an hour away from Stratford, and we had a discussion group for a couple of years where we delved into all kinds of different Masonic topics. And then we said, we need more than this. We think we want to form an observant lodge. So here in Ontario, we formed a club. We started having meetings with minutes, decided what we wanted to do, petitioned our Grand Lodge for dispensation to hold meetings, and had to contact all of the lodges in our district to receive their approval or disapproval and submit that to Grand Lodge. And then the Grand Master gave us dispensation, and we operated under dispensation for 1 year. And after the year under dispensation, he granted us a charter, and we became a fully fledged lodge.
Thank you. Brother Joe, now, are you a member of a Traditional Observance Lodge, or simply one that's moving in that direction?
2 of them.
Okay. Which ones are they?
Well, so BBF number 15 in DC is an observant style lodge. They're still listed on the MRF website. And then my lodge in Massachusetts practices some TO tenets, like having a chamber reflection and things like that. Yeah, none in Virginia.
Okay. There has not been a TO lodge in Virginia, correct?
No, actually, Alexandria, Washington 22 was listed on the Masonic Restoration Foundation website for a long time, until a couple of years ago when they had their little brouhaha.
Right. Okay. Brother Brad, your lodge, was it chartered, or is it an existing lodge that evolved into more of a heritage lodge?
Yeah, no, I'll share my experience, and then unfortunately
Please.
I'll have to jump off after this answer, just because of other obligations. But
Go out on a high note, George. Go out on a high note. I'm out of here.
Yeah, so our lodge was not a heritage style lodge or a TO style lodge prior to 2009. In 2009, we had a group of brothers that they started having monthly educational meetings at the lodge just to discuss things of interest, and it was all very much a TO style conversation of moving in that direction. And then in late 2010, early 2011, we started shifting some of the dress, some of the conversations, some of the practices, dimming the lights. And year by year, we've added in more. We've learned along the way. I will tell any brother that is thinking about converting a lodge, because we had conversations early on about just starting a new lodge. But we were very proud of being number one. We were the first lodge in the state, and we've continuously operated, never closed down. We have a rich history. So we had some conversations, and that was quickly shut down. But I will tell any brother thinking about converting or looking at moving in this direction, that patience will be your best friend. It is not a quick thing. It has taken us about 10.5 years to get where we're at today, and we still have a lot of work to do. But we, first for us was a shift in dress, and then a shift in dues, shift in requirement for attitude, ritual work. We started a degree, our candidate program, where we mentor candidates. The average length of time to go from entered apprentice to master mason in our lodge is about 16 months. Whereas the state requires 28 days between degrees, but we, as a lodge, typically average about 5 to 6 months per degree. So we started that probably in 2015, 16. And we've seen almost an 80% retention rate in brothers after 5 years going through that program. So for us, it has been a shift. We've converted, I wouldn't say a bad lodge, a struggling lodge by any means, but we were very stagnant and complacent with the masonry that we practiced. And so we shifted that, and we still have a lot of work to do, and we're learning as we go. But yeah, we converted our lodge from what I would say regular style Freemasonry to a heritage style. We have, again, moments of reflection. We use candles. We have the star, we have a projector that shoots stars on the screen. Our lights are dimmed. We have a moment of reflection, a chain of union at every meeting. Again, our proper dress, our dues. We have a reflection room, not a chamber of reflection, just because of some Grand Lodge hiccups, but we have a reflection room where brothers give their testament. But, for us, our focus is proper ritual and having the experience and culture for our brothers. And to answer one of your questions earlier that I was just wanted to jump in on, we have seen significant increases in membership at our meetings from moving in this direction. We typically average pre-COVID about 50 guys at our meeting. Probably 30 of those are members, 20 are visitors, just to come and experience it. So,
thank you. And Brother James, your lodge was formed as a TO lodge, or did it evolve from that is a regular lodge?
So first I want to point out that there isn't one example of what a TO lodge looks like. And,
of course.
I've explicitly said it, but it's very much a spectrum. So we have European Concept Lodge at Vitruvian. We have, what we're trying to form as a TO lodge at Pentalpho, where I'm the senior warden. And it's been a process where the lodge almost folded, and we stepped in and we had an opportunity to make it. That being said, I'm in the process of helping to form another lodge in Indiana, Lodge of St. Andrew, that will be a TO lodge or more observant lodge from the start.
So let me ask you, have you gotten pushback from Grand Lodge on the changes you've tried to make with your lodges?
Not from Grand Lodge, not from Grand Lodge officers. I'd say that there's individual brothers in district level positions and elsewhere that aren't a fan of it. And it's usually, they've heard that, oh, those guys, they're hoity-toity. And that kept me away from some of these lodges for a long time, but they were the most brotherly brothers I've met. And actually, we have a few Grand Lodge officers in a few of these lodge as members currently. So,
thank you. Brother Matt, I want to touch on something we haven't touched yet, is appendant bodies. In Observing the Craft, Andrew Hammer's opinion, as I read it, is we don't need no stinking Scottish Rite. He generally says that Masonry should be teaching everything you need to know about Masonry, and the whole idea of an appendant body is that the Blue Lodge is not telling the whole story, and if they're not telling the whole story, then the Blue Lodge need to tell the story, and any degree in any other body is not only superfluous, but it's taking your attention away from the Blue Lodge, and that's not good for the Blue Lodge. Is that a correct way of assessing his opinion? And you concur,
yes
or
and no. Yes and no. I've read his book a few times, and the first time I read it, I thought, man, he's being a little heavy-handed against the appendant bodies, and more especially the shrine. But Andrew is a very active Scottish Rite Mason and York Rite Mason. He is really active in the appendant body, so by no means was he trying to disparage them. His point being that a lot of brothers leave the Blue Lodge, or they maintain their membership in a Blue Lodge, but their interest lies with the appendant bodies. And why does that happen? That's because they join the Blue Lodge looking for one thing. They don't find what they're looking for, so they go to the Scottish Rite, York Rite, Shrine, wherever the case may be. That should be a signal to the Blue Lodges that they need to step up their game. There's nothing wrong with being a member of all these different bodies. I'm a member of a good portion of them myself. But at the end of the day, the Blue Lodge is where Masonry is. That's the heart of Masonry. And if you're not having these brothers attend the meetings, communications, then you have to ask yourself, why not? What is the lodge doing to fail them? So instead of pointing the finger at that brother, look internally into the lodge. What can the lodge do to step up its game, to bring interest back to those brothers so that they return?
Okay, so in your experience then, there is not a push within these observant lodges to keep people, discouraging people from joining the appendant bodies?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. No, because they're very different things. I mean, really, Masonry is the 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge. Everything else is extra, is icing on the cake. It's good. Masonry is always going to be the 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge, and that's where it should be. And I think that's Andrew's point in observing the craft. Again, not to disparage any of the other bodies, because they're great. They do wonderful work. There are the degrees of Scottish Rite Masonry are incredible, but it should not be a substitute for the Blue Lodge.
I think subscribe like in a nutshell.
Absolutely. Okay, I appreciate that. Let's see. Joe, come back to you. Well, now, Joe, in your experience with the TO lodges, Andrew said the same thing, and I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt here, that the same thing about the youth groups, that as I read what he said, Masonry shouldn't have youth groups, and it's a distraction. I mean, one of the chapters of his book was dealing with distractions, and he listed the appendant bodies and the youth groups as being a distraction from Masonry. So have you, in your experience, seen that, a sort of a pushback against supporting the youth or anything like that? Or
So I will say thank you for asking me that question, because I have a particular opinion about it, and then I actually have to go do daddy duty after this. So I do disagree with the book in that respect. Do I think that youth groups can become a distraction? Potentially. I think if you are, I'll give you a perfect example. I think if you are a Mason and you're spending more time with the Rainbow Girls or the DMLA than you are, making your lodge a better place, then that might be a problem, right? In terms of priorities and things like that. I'm a Rainbow Dad. I've seen you at youth group events, Chris. But I've never let that interfere with my craft Masonry and my responsibilities there. So can it be a distraction? Absolutely. I've seen parents who are Masons or members of other appendant bodies that you'll never see them in Blue Lodge, or you'll never see them at their meetings, but they're there for their kids. Now that may be a thing of, how long their cable toe is or things like that. But I think it's a nice to have, because my kids learn really important Masonic lessons by our supporting those youth groups. And I would be bummed if they were not there. So they could be distractions, but I don't think that should be the primary focus. But again, back to what I think Brother Andrew's point is in the book is, and I think Matt was alluding to this, was you got to make sure stuff is good in the craft lodge first, right? Before you start to measure success in other organizations, right? And I think that's what Brother Andrew is alluding to a little bit. If you're doing 25 Royal Arch things a month and you're never going to Blue Lodge, that's probably a problem. You know what I mean? Your craft lodge is suffering as a result. So my personal opinion is youth groups, you know, incorporate the family. Do I personally think that the family is excluded, you know, either appendant bodies or youth groups by the traditional observance concept? It depends on who you talk to. I don't think it is, because I love that my family is a member of my Masonic experience. But that's me.
I think we're in the same general opinion, and of course, both of us have been involved. I was in DMLA. DMLA brought me to Masonry. Job's Daughters has brought at least half of our past masters in the last 20 years to joining our lodge and becoming a master because their daughter joined Joby's because great grandpa was a Mason or whatever. And guess what? Dad's showing up at every Joby meeting. He starts asking, what's this Masonic thing that's hosting this? And they join OCV Lodge. So if you don't think that youth groups don't bring people directly into Masonry, they do. It's what brought me in. But I would like to think that in a well-run lodge that's observant or not, you can spare 1 or 2 members to support your youth groups. And I don't see it's a case where a youth group could simply having a youth group sponsored by your body is going to be detrimental to the lodge as a whole. It may take away that 1 member for a number of years, and he'll probably get active again in the lodge once his kids have grown up and he's no longer on the board or his focus.
But Chris, if you're picking one or the other, then that's a problem, right? There should be, you know, the lodge should be healthy enough to be able to support something like youth group without having to rip away members. You know what I mean?
Right.
At least that's my experience. But sorry to cut you off with that. I love you all. I have to go be dad for a little bit. So thank you for having me.
Joe. All right. Thank you, Joe. We appreciate it. So next question. Who's next in the rotation? Brother Neil. Are there other degrees or within the traditional observance lodges? Is there anything degree-wise other than a solemnity and taking it seriously and all like that, and maybe the dressings of the lighting and what all? Is there any additional degree work or anything outside the normal what a regular Blue Lodge would have that you've observed?
So the simple answer to that question is no. I tell people here in Ontario when they ask me about what we do at Templum Lucis, I say we practice exactly the same kind of masonry as you do. I belong to 4 lodges in Ontario. We use exactly the same ritual. We do exactly the same steps. At the Observant Lodge, we expect our members to have their work in a form of excellence. We do have at our lodge 2 things that we do outside of the ritual. Our constitution says that we're not able to change the ritual. It's part of one of the charges that you agree to when you're installed as a master. But outside of the ritual, before we open lodge, we have an opening charge, which helps us set the groundwork for the sacred space that we want our lodge to be once we open. And after we close the lodge, and the lodge is completely closed, we partake in a chain of union. So those are the only 2 mechanical things that we do differently than other lodges in Ontario. Some other lodges in Ontario employ a chain of union, but there are no other lodges that we're aware of that employ an opening charge before lodge opens.
I wanted to say this about the chain of union. What is in the book is very similar. Well, it's identical, I will say, to what we do in the 32nd degree in the Scottish Rite. Forming the chain of union, we call it leftovers. Everyone gets around the candidate, left arm on the shoulder, right hand around the back. So leftovers to remember. We form the chain of union around the candidate at the end of the 32nd degree after the obligation. In the Blue Lodge, every Master Mason's meeting, whether it's a degree or a stated, we gather around the altar and the master has a closing charge, and we simply stand close together in a circle around the altar. Now, apparently in some jurisdictions, they don't even do that. And what I read from Andrew's book is, in essence, they do the closing charge, but they actually form the chain of union at the closing charge rather than just everybody sort of standing in a close-knit circle around the master and the other two officers. So I see it as it's not really anything new other than you actually do the chain rather than just stand shoulder to shoulder all together. I would like to see it. I see that's what, if you want to add, if you're asking me the question, I'm sure some of you are, hey Chris, how do I go about starting moving towards observing the craft? Form a chain of union at the end of your meetings. Try it. It's not violating any ritual. And if you have a Master Mason's charge anyway, form the chain of union when you do it. But I would think that would be something that wouldn't violate anything, and it would kind of move towards the sense of brotherhood that we're looking for. So, just my opinion. Let me ask. We did some of these questions y'all ask. Oh yeah, let me do this with. Taking Brian away as co-host because he has to leave us. So we still got 30 participants. We're still doing good here. We've talked about education, and y'all have answered some of my questions before I had a chance to ask them, which is good. Do you have I'll just open this up to, well, I'll just ask, we'll do the next one down the list, be Brad. Did Brad leave? Brad left. James, do you have non-Masonic speakers at your meetings?
I have seen it before, but I would not say it's the norm.
Okay. You do have the ability, well, you're a lodge, so you call on and call off, so you can open up your lodge for a non-Mason to recognize community builder or anything like that. But typically you don't, you stick with Masonic speakers for your education.
Yes, and I'd argue that that's probably because of the limited amount of meetings we have where we probably want to see a Masonic subject. But at Pentalpha, we've been talking about, having various manly, the art of manliness, as a rotating topic.
Interesting.
Have a brother come in and talk about Scotch and whiskey and stuff like that.
Oh, of course. And that brings me to my next question. I'm going to ask Brother Matt. Do you serve alcohol at the meetings, or do you have to go somewhere else? Is alcohol involved in your lodge in any way?
Oh God, I wish.
Oh well.
No, it makes some of the meetings go so much smoother. No, but that's really a North Carolina thing. Alcohol is not allowed on the premises of a Masonic lodge. If the lodge is being rented out for like a wedding reception or something, yeah, they'll allow that. It has to be in the bylaws of the lodge. They will allow alcohol, but as far as Masonic functions, no. In some jurisdictions, a lot of times the lodge will go from labor to refreshment, take a break and have a couple of drinks, come back, resume the meeting. That's great. Typically what we've done in our lodge is have a dinner beforehand at a restaurant somewhere, have some beers or scotch or brandy or whatever, have a couple of drinks and not get inebriated or anything like that. Just
it'll have to be off premises. Okay.
Right.
Any other? Let's see, brother. I'm starting to lose my speakers, so I'm trying to remember who's still here. Brother James, do you smoke cigars after your meetings? Is that customary?
It's funny you should mention it. I wouldn't say it's customary, but it has happened. Yes. Okay.
I'll say for Ocean View Lodge, we have what we call the man cave, which is section. We have a 2-story building, and most lodges are typical. You have the lodge room upstairs and the dining hall downstairs. We sectioned off like almost a quarter of the room and put some easy chairs and couches together in a square and call that the man cave. There's a TV. It's only been on like twice since I've been in, but it's there. I guess if kids come and play video games or something. But we'll sit there and smoke cigars after the meeting and talk for hours. We routinely have our Friday night as our stated, and then work nights, and then Wednesday is school. When I was active before COVID, every Wednesday and every Friday, there'd be a reason to go to lodge. And of course, Wednesday is casual dress and it's just school. But we stayed there till 11 o'clock or later on a school night, just sitting down, having cigars and discussing things of importance within the lodge and just spending time together. And I get more out of the after the meeting, just sitting around having the cigars than I do in the meeting itself. And it's what makes our lodge popular and has attracted quite a few affiliations because we actually care about fraternizing with each other and having comradeship among the members instead of just go to a meeting and then go home. Brother Steve, you had a question? You had your hand up?
Yes, wishful brother Christopher. If I could just backtrack for one moment to Neil. Neil, there's two other observant lodges in our jurisdiction. One in Bath, Ontario, I think, and then one in Weston. Now, I haven't been able to make it to either of them, but I have been 2 or 3 times to you and 747, and I was just going to go before the evil virus hit. But are the other two quite similar as far as you know?
Thank you, Brother Stephen. Yeah, so I've been to both of those lodges. I've been down to Templum Fidelis in Bath, and for the people here who are not familiar with Ontario, that's maybe about a 2-hour drive east of Toronto, the city of Toronto. I've been down there, and they do things the same as we do. They're a small lodge. I don't think their membership is 25. They actually have in their bylaws that their lodge will not grow past a certain number. They light their lodge room by candlelight, the same as we do. They have a full formal festive board with each meeting as we do. They have education at the festive board and in the meeting as we do. That was my first experience in an observant lodge, and it left me in a sense of awe. The Herodom Lodge, which is the third lodge, observant lodge in Ontario, in West Toronto, is in a little bit of a different situation. They're still operating under dispensation. They received their dispensation from Grand Lodge, and it wasn't very long after that that COVID hit. So I expect, by knowing the members of that lodge, that they will also operate in a very similar fashion.
Good show. Thank you very much, sir.
All right, so I've asked the majority of my questions, and some got answered as I went along, so I don't want to have to rehash what we already kind of covered. I think we've done a good effort. I want to thank all the panel members, and I'm sorry a couple of you had to bail early, but I want to thank all of you for participating. This has been really entertaining and educational for me. I've learned a lot more about and dispelled some of the myths I had just from reading the book, so I'm glad we had this opportunity. If any of the members here have any questions to ask of our panelists while we still have 3 or 4 of them on board, anything at all regarding TO, please raise your hand or go ahead and speak. It's your chance. Speak up. Okay, I guess we covered everything. Good for us. Any other brother, anything to offer? We're coming up on noon, so we've had a good 2 hours here. This has been wonderful. I've enjoyed it. The time has flown by. We've covered a lot. And I really, again, want to thank all of our speakers, all of our panelists for attending. This is a very good discussion. Brother Pete,
Brother Christopher, if I could just butt in here, because
yes, I know you have to leave. Go ahead. Please.
I need to leave for a noon commitment. I've enjoyed this conversation. It seems to me that wherever I go online these days, there's a great thirst for conversation about observant Masonry. And in your own lodge, all you have to do is add one of the 8 steps that Andrew Hammer suggests. And one of the 8 steps will move your lodge forward to a more meaningful experience. It's a chore to set up an observant lodge. We did it from scratch and went under dispensation and received a charter. But I can imagine converting a lodge has a lot of pitfalls. But pay attention to the conversations, read the 8 steps, and once you're back in live meetings, incorporate one of the 8 steps and you won't go wrong. Thank you very much for having me here, Christopher. I'm open to talk at any time.
All right. Excellent summation, Neil. I appreciate that. Brother Richard.
Yes, I just want to kind of tag along with Brother Neil. This was, for me, very enlightening, and I find that a lot of these Zoom meetings that I attend, just like there's that thirst for knowledge. And some of the discussion here, I think as a worshipful master, even I learned and I can apply to my lodge to make it more traditional and more effective and make it more interesting for the brothers. So thank you all.
Yo, get on Valor and join Swag. I don't care. Just get on this game.
I appreciate that, brother. Thank you. Any brother have anything else to offer?
Yeah, I kind of want to echo what was said, but check out the Masonic Restoration Foundation website would be one of the first things I'd tell anyone who's interested. Pick up a copy of Observing the Craft or Island Freemasonry. And again, it all starts with breadcrumbs, right? You know, a lot of these TO lodges, we're here to teach other lodges, hey, you can be a little more, you know, contemplative with how you think about what you're doing in your lodge. And for me, I think that starts in the preparation room with the candidate. So just, you know, go through your lodge experience, and you don't have to convert your entire lodge over to TO or use the label observant, you know, just start doing little things. You know, it can get as granular as, you know, we're going to light the candles in a specific order, maybe east, southwest, or some other order, and it's going to, you know, it's going to show our dedication to the path of the sun or something like that. You know, we're going to make our candidates wait, you know, attend 2 meetings before they put in a petition, before they're even allowed to, you know. Just think about stuff like that.
Unmute. Thank you very much, brother. I posted in the chat our Facebook group page. Please join us at Virginia Research Lodge. We hope to have more meetings like this one. This has been great. My purpose, if you missed the talk early on, is we are not allowed to have stated meetings because of COVID. So I started having our lodge typically met on a Saturday at 10 o'clock. So I started having what I call unstated meetings, because it goes without saying we can't meet because of COVID. So if it goes unstated, we're going to be unstated instead of stated. That's my joke. So we're having unstated meetings every Saturday at 10. And starting next week, we will have a new URL that is actually the same for each meeting. I finally started doing a recurring meeting for Zoom because it didn't make sense to spin up a new one each time with a new long, garbled, hard to understand URL. And I've got a tiny URL that I put there, and I'm going to go ahead and add that. It's, let's see, make sure I've got it. I'm going to post it here. I'll put it in the thing. So going forward, that's it. But I'm going to go ahead and post it in the group. But it will start our, the Zoom meeting is going to have one URL going forward. So every week you can just keep that same URL, and every Saturday at 10, you can click and attend this meeting instead of spinning up a new URL for each meeting. Just want to share that. So every Saturday at 10, we'll have a different topic. I have a lot of speakers lined up. I'm really excited about some of them because they're big in Masonry. Moises Gomez is actually going to be a speaker here in a few upcoming weeks. I'm really excited that he's able to talk to us. But if you are a speaker, if you have a topic you want us to discuss, anything like that, please message me, please friend me on Facebook, please come to our Facebook group and leave a post with any suggestions, but best to message me directly. And if you're interested in speaking, or if you have a topic you want us to cover, I'm currently filling out weeks ahead because I want to have this all lined up. So every week I just create an event and be done and keep going. But we intend to have a different topic every week. And I want to cover things that are more in depth in Masonry while we have this opportunity. I want to get into more of the deeper stuff like we did today. And we're going to just keep moving in this direction and see how it goes. So any brother else have anything to offer? I'm going to go ahead and close this out unless anyone else has anything they want to say before we leave. All right. Thank you all very much for coming. Look forward to seeing you all again soon.
you.